The contract lay open between them, and Evelyn Ashcombe signed her name at the bottom of the page before she had read the final paragraph. The Duke of Ravenhill did not stop her. He had the contract angled toward her hand and a pen already uncapped, as though he had known, somehow, that a woman who was selling 3 months of her life did not need to linger over the terms. "You did not read it," he said. His voice was low, even, careful. The late afternoon light came in through the single west window of his London study and cut a hot bar across the green baize desk. The light caught the small gilt clock on the mantel, 4:15, and the dust motes drifting between them looked as though they had been standing there for some time. Evelyn capped the pen and set it down beside the inkwell. She kept her voice as steady as she could manage. "I read enough. 1 season. No scandal. No commitments beyond the arrangement. A fee sufficient to settle my mother's creditors and leave her comfortably situated for 2 years thereafter." She folded her hands into her lap because they had begun, treacherously, to shake. "If there is anything in the paragraph I did not read that I would have refused, I ask you to speak it now." He watched her. He did not answer at once. In the months that followed, she would return to this moment again and again. The length of the silence, the way his eyes moved from her signature to her face and back, the almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw before he spoke. "There is nothing in it," he said quietly, "that you would have refused." It was the first lie he told her. It was also, by some stranger reckoning, the only truth that mattered. A servant knocked once, admitted a tray of tea, and withdrew without speaking. The Duke did not pour. He sat across the desk from her, with his gloves folded on his knee, and regarded her the way a man regards a drawing he has long intended to keep. Evelyn did not know then that he had been watching her for 4 years. She did not know that the letter her solicitor had sent her 2 weeks earlier, the letter proposing this engagement, the letter that had arrived on the morning the last of her mother's creditors came to the door, had been written at the Duke's request, dictated almost word for word. She knew only that she had £600 on the desk. She knew that her mother's rheumatism would not survive another winter in the house on Chelford Street without coal. She knew that the man across from her had pale grey eyes and a very quiet mouth, and hands that rested on the contract as though the paper was something fragile. "Miss Ashcombe," he said, "you will need a wardrobe." "I have brought 3 dresses. They are suitable for a country rector's daughter in mourning, which is what I am." "You are a country rector's daughter in mourning, who is shortly to be presented as the fiancée of a duke." He did not smile, but the corner of his mouth tilted in a way that suggested he might have, once, in some other room. "My grandmother has already instructed her modiste. I'm Madame Claudel of Bruton Street. She will call on you tomorrow at 10. "Your grandmother is in on this?" "My grandmother is the reason for it." This time the smile flickered, and was gone before she could be certain of it. "She is 81. Her physician says she has perhaps 6 months. Her great wish is to see me engaged before she goes. She does not ask a great deal of me otherwise. I would like to give her this." It was the second lie. This one was more generous. Evelyn breathed in through her nose and out through her mouth, the way her father had taught her before he died, in order to steady a hand that would shortly need to sign a document. "Then I am to play your fiancé for your grandmother's sake. For 3 months, yes. And at the end of the season?" He looked down at the contract. "The details of the parting are specified." She had not read them. She felt a strange, faint twist in her stomach, the kind of twist one feels on a horse that shifts suddenly under the saddle, and she steadied it and stood. "Then I will return tomorrow at noon to meet Madame Claudel. I presume the fiction begins on Saturday." "Saturday." He rose when she did. His movement was controlled, economical, the movement of a man who had learned to use his body without excess. "I will call for you at 3. We will ride in the park. Afterwards, there will be tea with my grandmother in Grosvenor Square." "Very well." She was at the door before he spoke again. "Miss Ashcombe." She paused. She did not turn. "I am—" He stopped. She heard him let out a breath that was not quite a sigh. "I am sorry it has come to this. For you. I would have wished, if I could have, another road." She turned then, and looked at him across the length of the room. The sunlight had shifted. The bar of gold was gone from the desk, and had moved to the rug, where it lay on the pattern of a Persian vine. "I would have wished another road too, Your Grace," she said. "But this is the road we have." She did not see the look on his face when she closed the door. If she had, she would have called the whole thing off. The door clicked shut behind her. The footman in the hall had already gone before her to the front. The marble of the entry was pale and polished, and the sunlight coming through the fanlight over the door made a long trapezoid on the floor. Her own shoes made a small, hollow sound on the marble that she had not noticed on the way in. A hothouse arrangement of pale roses sat on a console table. One petal had fallen, and no one yet had come to remove it, and the petal lay pale pink on the dark wood in a way that looked, she thought, like an accident a painter had made on purpose. The footman opened the front door for her. The street outside was loud after the quiet of the house. A drayman's cart rattled past. A boy was calling prices of hot buns from a corner tray. A woman in lavender silk had stopped in the street opposite to examine her own reflection in a shop window and pretend she had not been doing so. Evelyn stood on the top step a second longer than she meant to. The sun was still warm. The light in Ravenhill Square had that peculiar early evening quality when the spring day had a little of the afternoon left in it, but was already beginning to slant. She took the shallow steps down to the pavement, in the measured, deliberate way her father had taught her she should walk down any steps in public. As though the steps had been, she recalled him saying, constructed specifically for her descent, and she was merely obliging them. When she returned to the narrow house on Chalford Street, the street was in its quiet afternoon mood. The mood it took on after the milk had come, and before the postman arrived for the second delivery. A woman was beating a rug in the area of the house opposite. Two boys with a hoop paused at the top of the street and looked at Evelyn with the bald curiosity of children who had not yet learned to pretend otherwise. They had seen her go out in the borrowed afternoon gown, and they had seen her come back, and they were calibrating the distance between those two things in the manner of children, which is to say, unguardedly. She nodded at them. They ran on. A tradesman's cart went by. The air smelled of coal smoke and early hyacinths from the pot on the step of number 17. She let herself into the house with her own key. Her mother was asleep in the parlour with a book open on her chest. Evelyn stood a moment in the doorway and watched the slow rise and fall. The coal in the grate was burning low. There was still, in the kitchen, half a cold mutton pie and 3 candles on the dresser. The small grandfather clock in the corner of the parlour, her father's, carried from Hampshire at great effort and considerable expense, ticked with its particular familiar limp, the long pendulum catching on the 11 o'clock hour every time it passed. Evelyn had meant for years to have it fixed. She no longer knew whether she wanted to. The limp had become, in her head, the sound of the house itself. 3 months, she thought. 1 season. 1 gentleman's grandmother who would die content. £600. Madame Claudel at 10. She did not sleep that night. She lay in her narrow bed and watched the cracks in the ceiling in the dark. She composed, in her head, the architectural drawings she had been composing for years. A house she would never live in. A house with south-facing windows, and a library with 3 chimneys, and a roofline like the long, slow breath of a resting animal. She had drawn it 100 times. She had burned 99. The one she kept was in a tin box under her bed, folded in quarters, stained with ink at the edges. Outside, the bells of St. Giles struck the half-hour. A cab passed in the street. The wheels went slowly on the cobbles because the horse was tired, and the driver clicked his tongue once, but did not urge it on. Somewhere below, in the kitchen, the cat jumped down from the dresser. She did not know that a drawing very like it hung in a frame in the Duke of Ravenhill's private study. She did not know that it had hung there since the summer 3 years before, when he had watched her stand at a lectern in a country assembly room and sketch the outline of a rebuilt parish hall on a scrap of paper, answering questions about the roof pitch from farmers twice her age. She did not know anything, really, about the man whose name she had just agreed to wear for 90 days. She did not know that he took his breakfast at 7:40 each morning, that he read the Times back to front, that he preferred strong coffee and a heel of yesterday's bread over a proper breakfast of kidneys and eggs. She did not know that his valet, a grave, patient Welshman named Gwyn, had been with him since he was 22 and considered himself, after 16 years, to still be in training for the role. She did not know that his first horse had been called Peter, that his second and present horse was called Patience, that he had named Patience ironically, and then, on consideration, not ironically at all. She did not know that he remembered the birthdays of all 11 of his grandmother's godchildren, and sent each one a small, inexpensive, perfectly chosen gift on the morning of the day. She did not know that his housekeeper, a terrifying Scotswoman named Mrs. McInnes, had informed him the preceding Tuesday that she had bought, on her own authority, 2 bolts of unbleached linen for bed linen in the east wing, on the grounds that the young lady will be needing her own rooms in that part of the house, and that he had neither confirmed nor denied the plan, because he had not, at that hour, dared to. She knew only that she had signed the contract. She did not know he had never set the end date. The week between the contract and the ride passed in a strange, suspended weather of its own. Madame Claudel arrived at 10 on Monday, as promised, with 2 apprentices and a great wicker basket of silks, and measured Evelyn with a tape that had, Madame Claudel remarked, measured the hips of a minor Bourbon princess in 1788. The apprentices did not speak. Madame Claudel spoke constantly, and in several languages. She decided for Evelyn, with the absolute authority of a woman who had seen the Parisian court at close range, that the pink silk was correct, that a white muslin with green ribbon was correct, that a grey half-mourning was correct for calling on the dowager, and that a 6th gown in cream was required, for reasons she did not trouble to explain. Evelyn's mother, who had not seen so many lengths of new silk laid out on a bed since her own wedding, wept in the way elderly women weep when a thing that should have been possible has, after being impossible for a long time, become possible again. She apologized for the weeping. She told Madame Claudel that she had never been so ashamed of her own nerves. Madame Claudel, without pausing in her pinning, said, "Madame, I have fitted 3 ladies this year for the funerals of their sons. Your tears are tears of joy. Please do not apologize for them. They are the most useful kind." Evelyn stood between them on the chair her mother had set in the middle of the parlor, and watched the light move on the wallpaper, and felt the pins of her new wardrobe find her ribs one by one, and thought about the fact that she was being paid £600 to pretend to be something she had not been raised to be, and that the pretending was beginning already to feel like a kind of remembering. Letters came. On Tuesday, a footman in the Ravenhill livery, which was a dark, good green, with silver buttons that had the Ravenhill seal on them, delivered a note asking whether she would be at home on Wednesday morning to receive a call of introduction from his aunt, Lady Sturton. Evelyn wrote back that she would. Lady Sturton came. Lady Sturton was a small, handsome, deeply practical woman in her middle 50s who had, Evelyn would learn, been a great beauty in 1782, and had, since that time, given all her considerable capability to the government of the Ravenhill family's estates. She drank 1 cup of tea. She took Evelyn's measure with a gaze that was not cold so much as clear. She departed. She sent, that evening, a note to her nephew that said simply, "I approve. You have not been foolish. Go carefully. She is cleverer than you." Marcus did not reply to the note. He showed it to Evelyn 12 weeks later, when it was already, by then, an artifact of a history they both knew differently. The first public appearance was the park at 3 on Saturday, and everything she had rehearsed in the week between the contract and the ride went out of her head in the moment he handed her up into the curricle. He was in fawn breeches and a dark coat, and he lifted her with one hand at her elbow and one at her waist, and the touch was so brief and precise and practiced that she did not register it as a touch at all until he had stepped back and taken up the reins. Her waist burned where his hand had been, an outline of his palm in heat that lingered 3 blocks into the ride. "You will need," he said without looking at her, "to speak to me as though you like me." "I shall endeavor, Your Grace." Marcus. "I beg your pardon?" "In public, Marcus. In private, whatever you prefer. My grandmother will take it as evidence of affection if you use my given name before her, and she is in Grosvenor Square in an hour." The park was crowded in the particular English way that meant every person of consequence had decided, on the same Saturday afternoon, to be seen. Carriages moved in a slow oval under the new leaves, the gravel crunching in a steady, unhurried rhythm beneath the hooves. The sun was warm on her shoulders through the thin pink silk. Her gloves were too new, and the stitching at the base of the thumb pinched. A woman selling primroses stood near the gates. A boy with a hoop ran across the path in front of them, and his mother called him back in the kind of voice Evelyn had heard her own mother use long ago, when Evelyn had been 7 and had climbed the roof of the hayloft. The smell of the park was clean. Bruised grass, leather, a distant thread of lilac from someone's crushed corsage. Every carriage they passed contained women she did not know, who stared at her with frank, cataloguing interest. Evelyn sat with her hands folded in her lap, and the borrowed bonnet pinned precisely at the correct angle Madame Claudel had shown her, and answered questions about the weather in a voice she was fairly certain belonged to someone else. A blonde woman in a barouche turned fully around to watch them pass. A man on a bay gelding doffed his hat and did not smile. A pair of matrons fell silent as their carriage drew level with his, and then resumed speaking in lower voices. "They are wondering," he said mildly, "where you came from." "I am wondering the same." That made him laugh. It was a short, unexpected sound, and he covered it with a cough, and for the first time she thought, "He is a man who has not laughed in some time, and who is not certain the laughter belongs to him." "You came from Hampshire," he said. "Your father was the rector of Chelford Parva. He died 6 years ago of a long illness. Your mother is unwell. Your 3 elder sisters married country clergymen of modest means. You are the 4th and last. You were introduced to me through Mr. Harlow, my grandmother's man of business, who is also your mother's solicitor." "That is the story?" "That is the truth." She glanced at him then. He was looking straight ahead, between the ears of the near horse, and his profile in the spring light was clean and serious. "Your Grace." "Marcus." "Marcus. You know a great deal about me. Mr. Harlow is thorough." "Mr. Harlow is thorough," she agreed. "Or you asked." A pause. The horses clipped along. "Mr. Harlow is thorough," he said again. Grosvenor Square smelled of new leaves and coal smoke and the faint sweetness of horses. The house itself was tall and pale, and built in the reign of a king 3 reigns ago, and the footman at the door had clearly been positioned to open it at the exact moment the curricle halted. He swung it wide without a glance, and bowed Evelyn through as though she had been coming for 20 years. The hall was cool and smelled of beeswax and dried roses. A great staircase wound away upward under a dome of painted plaster. Somewhere above, a clock struck the half-hour in a voice like a contralto. A maid in black moved silently across the far end of the passage with a covered tray. The yellow drawing room was on the ground floor and opened onto a small walled garden where a magnolia was coming into flower against a south wall. The light in the room was the color of pale butter. There were 6 windows and no visible drapery. The Duchess, Evelyn would learn later, disliked anything that blocked the light. The Dowager Duchess was 81 years old and sat in a chair by the fire in that yellow drawing room with a silver-topped walking stick across her knees and a small, liver-colored spaniel asleep on her feet. She was not a large woman. She had pale, pitiless blue eyes and a mouth that had clearly been, in its day, both beautiful and unkind, and she did not rise when they entered. "Marcus," she said, "bring her here." He did not bring her. He did not need to. Evelyn crossed the room of her own will and curtsied at the correct distance and waited, her hands folded, while the Duchess looked at her. The silence went on a long moment. The fire hissed. The spaniel did not wake. "You are not pretty," said the Duchess finally. "No, Your Grace. You are striking. That is a different thing. It will last longer. Sit down." Evelyn sat. The Duke did not. He leaned his shoulder against the mantel and watched the two of them with a carefulness that Evelyn, in another season of her life, might have read as tenderness, but that now read only as vigilance, like a man watching a wire stretched across a doorway. "How many offers have you refused, Miss Ashcombe?" "None, Your Grace." "None? I have not been offered for." Why not?" "My father's living was small, Your Grace. My dowry is smaller. I am 26. I am, as you have observed, not pretty." "You are pert." "I am practical. I have found that pertness costs money I do not have. I spend what I can afford." The Duchess laughed. It was a dry, surprised laugh, and the spaniel opened one eye and closed it again. "Marcus," said the Duchess, "pour the sherry." He poured the sherry. "My grandson," said the Duchess to Evelyn, "is a man of very few words and very settled habits and a perfect horror of being managed. I have managed him for 32 years. He dislikes it intensely. He dislikes it more when he cannot detect which of us is doing it." "I am not managing him, Your Grace." "You will." The Duchess accepted her glass and sipped. "Either you will manage him, which will make him happy, or he will manage you, which will not. I have advised him to find a woman he could not manage. He tells me he has." Evelyn did not look at the Duke. She looked at the carpet. The carpet was green, with a repeating pattern of small, gold fleur-de-lis, and she counted 6 of them before she trusted her voice. "I believe His Grace is too generous." "He is not. He is the most exact man you will ever know. If he says he cannot manage you, he means he has already tried and failed." The Duchess took another sip of her sherry. "You will marry at the end of the season. I should like to attend, if I am still alive." "Grandmamma." "Hush, Marcus. The girl has answered better than any of the others. I am old, not stupid, and I have no interest in watching a 90-day pantomime. If you meant to marry her, you would have. I should like to know when you mean to." "Grandmamma." "At the close of the season," said the Duchess. "That is your deadline. I will not live to see August. I should like to see the girl wear the ring my mother wore before me. Is that plain enough?" Evelyn set her sherry glass down on the small table at her elbow very carefully. Her hand did not shake. She took as much pride in that as in anything she had ever done. "Your Grace," she said, "I have not known your grandson a week." "Then," said the Duchess, "you will know him very well indeed by July. I advise you to pay attention. He hides." "Grandmamma, I believe Miss Ashcombe has had enough for one afternoon." "Miss Ashcombe has not had nearly enough. Miss Ashcombe will come to tea on Tuesday. Without you. Good afternoon, my dear. Try the Madeira cakes. They are the one thing cook has ever done properly." In the carriage going home, neither of them spoke for 3 streets. Then the Duke said, very quietly, into the air between them, "I apologize. She is 81, and she is dying, and she does not see any reason to be polite any longer. She used to see the reason. She has stopped. She thinks we are to marry. She wants us to marry. That is different." "It is different," said Evelyn slowly, "from the terms of the contract I signed." "Yes." "Then why—" "Because," he said, and his gloved hands tightened very slightly on the ribbons. "I told her what she wanted to hear. She is dying, Miss Ashcombe. I have told her every lie I could invent to make her easy in her last months. I am sorry you have walked into the middle of one of them. I did not know she would speak of it so directly. I should have known. She does not wait." Evelyn looked at him. His face was in profile again. It was a face that was very still when he did not permit it to move, and she could see the effort of the stillness at the line of his jaw. "Marcus." He looked at her, surprised. It was the first time she had used the name outside the park. "Marcus, if your grandmother dies believing we are to be married, and afterwards we are not, she will not know. She will be gone. That is the point of the lie. That is a cruel comfort. It is the only one I have been able to offer her." She did not answer. She watched the streets turn and the lamps begin to be lit, and she thought about her own father, who had died on a Sunday morning with his prayer book open on the bed beside him, and how he had asked her at the end whether the congregation would have a rector after him, whether Chalford Parva would be all right without him, and how she had said yes, yes of course, and how it had not been true. "Every lie I could invent," she said at last, "is exactly the right phrase." He glanced at her. "Is it?" "My father died, Your Grace, Marcus, 6 years ago. He asked me whether the parish would be provided for. I said yes." "And was it?" "The new rector was given to gin, and the roof of the church fell in the following year, and my mother was put out of the rectory within the month. It has been not good. But he died easily, because I lied to him." He was silent. "I do not fault you," she said, "for your grandmother. I only—" "You only—" "I only wonder what you will tell yourself after." The curricle stopped in front of her mother's house. He did not move to hand her down. A footman from the house across the street was watching from a window. A servant was sweeping the step of number 11. The last light of the afternoon was gold in the chimney pots. "I will tell myself," he said, after a long moment, "that she was loved. By her family. By the end. That is what she would want to believe. That is what I will tell myself." "And yourself?" He looked at her then, full on, for the first time since they had left the park. His eyes were not grey. She had thought they were grey. In the low light, they were the colour of rain on slate. And there was in them a thing she did not know the name of. "I do not think about myself," he said. Then he came around the curricle and handed her down, and bowed over her hand in the fashion prescribed for public affection between fiancés, and left her on the step of her mother's house. She stood a moment before she went in. The sweeping boy across the street was watching. The lamplighter had begun his round. She thought, "I've signed a contract for 3 months with a man I do not understand, in the service of a woman who does not want a pantomime, and I have already begun to wonder whether I am the one being managed, or the one managing." And behind all of it, underneath all of it, there ran a thread like a note held on a single string, very low, very constant. The outline of his hand, still at her waist, from an hour and 40 minutes before. She told herself she would stop noticing it. She did not stop noticing it. The week that followed was measured in visits. Morning calls, afternoon rides, an evening at the theatre. Evelyn learned to walk in the new pink silk that Madame Claudel had fitted in 3 days. She learned to answer questions she had not expected. She learned to curtsy to the great women of London, and to smile at them as though she had been raised to it. She had not been raised to it. She had been raised to write Sunday lessons for her father, and keep the parish accounts and repair her own boots. What she had not expected was how little the shift seemed to cost her. She wore the clothes as though they were costumes. She took them off each night, and was still herself. London, in its first real April, was a city at the exact pitch of itself. The plane trees had opened their leaves in squares and terraces. The barrows of cauliflower and early asparagus tilted along Covent Garden at dawn. The river ran bright and cold, and carried up through the streets the peculiar, half-savoury smell of a working tide. The bookshops of Piccadilly had put their new editions in the windows. The print shops had hung fresh caricatures of the Regent in places of honour. The pastry cook on Half Moon Street had put up a sign advertising lemon tarts. There was in the air a kind of held breath. The anticipation peculiar to the London season, when the great houses of Mayfair unshuttered their upper windows, and the carriages went out again after their long winter in coach houses, and every hostess of consequence had made a list. Evelyn was on the list. It startled her to see her own name on a pasteboard card carried upstairs by Henderson. Miss Evelyn Ashcombe, and, in smaller letters below, with the compliments of Lady Caroline Westerby. She did not yet know who Lady Caroline Westerby was. She would, shortly. The pink silk was fitted 3 times. Madame Claudel was small, French, sharp, and had loved, decades before, a man who had died at Trafalgar. She retained the romance of a woman who had stopped expecting anything in particular from the world, and so gave her whole attention to the fit of a sleeve. She stuck pins between her lips. She walked round Evelyn in the fitting room, with her head tilted like a terrier listening for a rat. She said, in her precise third-decade English, "You have a long waist, mademoiselle. I shall compliment it. Stand where you are." And Evelyn stood, while Madame Claudel did whatever she did, and came out at the end of a morning with a gown that fitted in a way no gown had fitted her before. She looked at herself in the long glass. She saw a woman she recognized, and did not recognize, in equal proportion, which, it turned out, was what a well-cut gown did. It did not change you. It showed you, more precisely, what you already were. What she had not expected was Marcus. He was, she discovered, in small increments, without warning, against her will, precise in ways she had not predicted. He remembered everything. He remembered she did not take sugar in her tea. He remembered her mother's rheumatism and sent, without announcement, a warming pan wrapped in flannel. He remembered that she had said, once, in the curricle, that she had never seen the Elgin marbles, and on Wednesday morning a note came asking whether she would like to go. And at 11, he was in her drawing room with his gloves in his hand and a careful distance in his eyes. And they went. The British Museum on a weekday morning was a curiously public and a curiously private place. The galleries had opened half an hour earlier. A clergyman with a sketchbook sat on the single bench at the end of the long room, drawing the same fragment of a standing figure he had been drawing on each of the last 9 Wednesdays. A pair of elderly ladies in black bombazine had made the slow progress from the Rosetta Stone to the Townley Gallery, and were now seated on the bench in the second room, recovering their breath. A party of schoolboys had passed through at 10 and been removed at 11. The floor was old and stone, and kept its own cool against the thickening spring day outside. The air smelled of old dust and beeswax and, faintly, of the waterproofing that had been reapplied to the roof above the portico the preceding autumn. They stood in a long gallery of grey stone figures, and he did not talk. He watched her walk the length of the frieze, and when she stopped in front of the horse's head that she had read about in a pamphlet at 17, he stood at her elbow and did not look at the horse at all. "What do you see?" he said finally. "I see," she said, "a jaw that was cut from a live animal." He did not move. "I mean, the sculptor. He had seen a horse full out. The nostrils are flared for running. The ears are back because someone is on its neck. It is a horse that is afraid. Most sculptors make horses that are beautiful. This one made a horse that was alive." "Go on." "I do not have anything else to say about it, Your Grace." Marcus. "Marcus, I do not have anything else to say. Tell me something about a building." She turned her head. She had not expected the request. He was looking at the horse's head now, as if, for the first time, he had begun to see it. "A building? Tell me about a building you have thought about." They were alone in the gallery. A pair of clerks had passed through 20 minutes before. No one else had come. The light was grey, overcast, the diffuse grey of a London spring morning through high clerestory windows. Evelyn felt the weight of the moment, It was an odd weight, like the weight of a door she had not meant to open. "I have thought," she said slowly, "about the parish hall at Chalford Parva. It was rebuilt 4 years ago. They did it wrong." "How?" "The roof pitch is too shallow. When the winter wind blows out of the west, the snow builds on the lee side and cracks the rafters. It has cracked twice. The second time, they patched with new green oak. Green oak twists. By next winter, it will crack again." "What would you have done?" "I would have raised the pitch by 5 degrees. I would have extended the eave on the lee side to carry the wind up. I would have used seasoned oak. I would have put a small stone buttress on the south wall because the ground is soft there. They built it by a committee of the gentry. None of them asked a farmer. Any farmer in the parish would have said the snow falls heaviest on the lee side. They did not ask." She stopped. Her cheeks were warm. "I have spoken too long." "Not at all," he said. He was watching her again. Not the horse, not the frieze, her, steadily, without evident expression. She felt the steadiness of it, the way one feels the steadiness of a hand on the small of one's back in a crowd. Not constraining, not demanding. Just there. "I did not mean to, Miss Ashcombe. Evelyn. Tell me about another building." She told him about the nave of Salisbury Cathedral, which she had seen once on her 18th birthday with her father. She told him about the dimensions of a small farmhouse outside Winchester she had sketched from the road at 15. She told him about the absurdity of the new terrace houses in Bloomsbury, where the kitchens had been placed below ground level because fashion required it, and the housemaids were dying of the damp. She told him about the proportions of a Palladian window that had been laid on its side over the stables at her cousin's house, and how the proportion had been ruined, and how nobody had noticed, because nobody in the family looked at the stables. He listened. She had not known until then that she had been starving for someone to listen. She had not known, even, that it was a hunger. She had thought of the drawings in her tin box as a private vice, the way other women had private novels. She had thought it shameful that she wanted this. She had thought it a child's wanting. When they came out of the museum into the watery noon sun, he handed her into the carriage and took his place opposite her. And after the horses had started moving, he said, "Tomorrow, my grandmother would like you to tea. I will go. She does not mean to frighten you." "I am not frightened." "No," he said, and looked out of the window. "No, you are not." That evening, she sat with her mother in the parlour and read aloud from a novel they had not finished. Her mother fell asleep halfway through a chapter, which she did most evenings now, and Evelyn went on reading to the end of the chapter anyway. The house around her made its small, usual sounds. The step on the stairs that had always creaked, the kettle settling on the hob, the cat conducting its long, slow investigation of the draught under the kitchen door. She told her mother that night that the Duke was very kind. She did not tell her mother what kind meant. She did not, because she did not yet have a word for it. No. She went up to her bed early with a candle. The little bedroom was the same little bedroom it had always been. The tin box was under the bed. The cracks in the ceiling were the same cracks. She lay in the dark and listened to her mother breathing 2 rooms away, and felt, for the first time in 6 years, that there was more of a life in front of her than behind. She did not yet know what kind of life. She did not yet know whether she would keep it or lose it. She only knew that she had not had, in a long time, a week like this one. Tea with the Dowager was a small, precise affair in a small, precise room. Not the yellow drawing room this time, but a morning room at the back of the house, wallpapered in a pattern of dove-grey stripes, and hung with a single oil painting of a sow and her litter in a Wiltshire farmyard. The sow had a wise, affronted expression, and had clearly been a real sow, known personally by the painter. A tall case clock ticked in the corner. The grate held a small, perfectly laid fire that threw no heat, but a great deal of small, cheerful sound. A bowl of hothouse violets stood on a japanned tray. The tea service was old, thin, and figured with a repeating Greek key, The sugar tongs had been in use since before the dowager's own birth. The footman set it down with the quiet competence of a man who had poured tea through 3 coronations and did not mean to make a mistake at this one. He withdrew without shutting the door all the way. The Duchess did not call him back. The Duchess did not speak for the first 10 minutes. She watched Evelyn accept her cup. She watched Evelyn not take sugar. She watched Evelyn hold the saucer at the exact angle of a woman who had been taught once, carefully, by a governess she could not afford, and not retaught since. "He has told you I am dying," said the Duchess. "Yes. Do you believe it?" "I have no way to know, Your Grace." "I will tell you, because he will not. I am not dying. I am old. My physician thinks I should be dying because he is a Scotsman and he has read books about it, but I am not. I will, very possibly, be alive at Christmas. I may be alive the Christmas after. I eat beef on Sundays. My mother lived to 94. She was a nastier woman than I am." Evelyn set down her cup very carefully. "Then he has lied to me. He has lied to me also. He has lied to me for 3 years. He keeps me comfortable. I allow him to. He has not lied about you. He is not capable, that I have ever noticed, of lying about you. When he spoke your name at Christmas 2 years ago, I knew. I have been waiting for him to bring you into this house for 2 years. It has been a long 2 years, Miss Ashcombe. I am a patient woman for my age, but not for your age." "Your Grace, child, hush." The Duchess reached across and covered Evelyn's hand with her dry, papery one. The rings on the Duchess's fingers were cool and heavy. "My grandson is an honorable man. He has gone about this in a ridiculous, cowardly, engineered way. That is also his nature. He does not ask for things. He arranges them. He has arranged you. You will need to decide whether you mind. Do not answer now. Think. When you have thought, come back and tell me what you mean to do about it." When she got home that afternoon, she went up the narrow stairs to her narrow bedroom, closed the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and did not cry. The afternoon light in the little bedroom came through 2 sash windows that had not been painted in a decade, and gave onto the back of a row of houses in the next street. The view, from a standing height, was a kind of archipelago of chimney pots and slate. A pigeon sat on the lead flashing of the nearer roof. A neighbour's cat, half a mile away, was either quarrelling with or courting another neighbour's cat at enormous length and considerable volume. The air in the little room was warmer than the air of the house below, in the way of rooms high under eaves in spring. There was a smell in the room, which Evelyn could not identify until she had sat a moment longer and recognized it. The faint, almost gone scent of the pine needle sachet her father had once made her at 12 out of an old handkerchief. She had kept the sachet for years. It had been dust before her 18th birthday. The smell had stayed in the wood of the bed frame. She sat on the edge of the bed in the lingering smell of her father's last gift, and she did not cry. She thought. She thought about the letter from Mr. Harlow. She thought about the careful, legal, almost kindly phrasing on it. An arrangement which, if entered upon, would be to the considerable relief of your mother's immediate circumstances, and would place no lasting burden upon your person beyond the duration herein specified. She had read it twice, at breakfast, and had thought, what a man of curious phrasing Mr. Harlow must be. She thought so still. She thought, now, that Mr. Harlow had written every word under instruction, and had known exactly, and rather sadly, what he was being asked to do. She thought about the warming pan, wrapped in flannel. It had arrived one Tuesday morning in a basket with no note and an assortment of oranges. The flannel had been a soft, unbleached wool. It had clearly been cut from a new bolt. The warming pan inside had been filled with coals, and was, by the time it reached her mother's bedroom, still warm. Her mother, who slept poorly, and who had been cold without complaint for 11 years, had wept. She thought about Marcus in the British Museum, asking her about a building. She thought about a man she did not know 2 years ago, speaking her name over Christmas port to his grandmother. She thought about the end date. And then, very slowly, very carefully, like a woman easing a splinter from under a fingernail, she went to her wardrobe, knelt, pulled from the back of it the tin box she had carried from Hampshire, opened it, and laid the drawings out on the bed. 10 of them. Her small, secret life. The parish hall as it should have been. A double almshouse for Chelford. A rebuilt rectory with decent kitchens and a root cellar on the north side. The house she had never drawn a client for. The house with the 3 chimneys and the long, slow roof. She sat looking at them until the light went out of the window. Then she folded them into her reticule, put on her gloves, sent for a hackney, and went, at 7:30 in the evening, to Ravenhill House. The footman's face did not move when she asked for the Duke. She was admitted into a side drawing room. She waited 9 minutes by the clock. When Marcus came, he was still in his dinner dress. He had not eaten. She saw at once that he had been at his desk. There was ink on his middle finger. "Evelyn, is your mother—" "My mother is well." She held out the reticule and then, losing her nerve, set it down on the pier table instead. "Your grandmother is not dying." He did not answer. He closed the drawing-room door behind him with great care, and then turned and placed his hands, very slowly, on the back of a chair, as a man places his hands when he has been expecting a blow for some time, and it has, finally, come. "She told you." "She told me. She also told me you spoke my name at Christmas 2 years ago." "Yes." "Marcus." "Yes." "Look at me." He looked at her. His face was... She had never seen his face like this. It was the face of a man who had prepared every answer, every contingency, every phrase, and who now found that none of them served him. 3 years ago, he said, I was in Hampshire, visiting my uncle at Winwall. We stopped for the night at an assembly room at Chalford Parva. There was a subscription meeting. They were raising money to repair the parish hall. Yes? You were there. You stood at the lectern. They had asked you, they had told my uncle, because your father had died 3 years before, and you knew the accounts. You answered questions about the roof pitch. A man from the front of the room told you the pitch was a woman's concern. You told him, without raising your voice, that it was the rafter's concern, and that the rafter did not know he was male or female, but it knew it was tired. Do you remember? I remember. I did not speak to you. I did not introduce myself. I left before the meeting ended. I had been promised, Miss Ashcombe, for 8 years to a woman I had not seen in 2. A woman I had contracted for when I was 1 and 20, before I had any idea what I meant to do with my life. She died that summer, of a fever in Naples, without my ever seeing her again. I have never known in the years since whether I regret it, or whether I was saved by it. I thought, that night at Chalford Parva, that if I had not been promised to Catherine, I should have spoken to you. I should have asked your name. I should have written. I did not. I came home. I kept, in a book, a scrap of paper I asked a man to sketch for me the following week, the outline of the rebuilt parish hall as you had described it. It is upstairs in my study. It has been upstairs in my study for 3 years, Miss Ashcombe. He stopped. He was still gripping the chair back. I learned 3 months ago that your mother was failing, that her creditors had come to the door and she had no one left. Mr. Harlow wrote to me. Mr. Harlow is not my grandmother's man of business. Mr. Harlow is mine. My grandmother asked him for advice on her own settlements a year ago, and I instructed him then, if ever he heard any word of a Mrs. Ashcombe of Hampshire or her daughter, to tell me. I had been listening for your name for 3 years. He brought it to me in February. I did not know how else. I did not know how to reach you as a stranger. I engineered the engagement. I told my grandmother I had met a girl I meant to marry. I asked Harlow to write to your mother, proposing a discreet arrangement in which her daughter could be secured. I told myself,
You told yourself?
I told myself that 3 months in London would at least allow me to know you. That if, at the end of it, you were indifferent, I would make a settlement on your mother and release you, and you would go home with enough to keep yourself, and you would not know. I told myself that this was a service. Marcus, I have been arrogant. I have been dishonest. I did not mean to, Marcus. Look at me. He looked up. You are a great fool, she said. He breathed out. Yes, he said, I am. They stood looking at each other across the small drawing room. The candles on the pier table hissed. The clock on the mantel struck 8:15. She picked up the reticule from the pier table. She untied the string. She laid, on the pier table, the 10 drawings. He did not come to the table. He waited. I came here, she said, to give you these, because your grandmother said I should decide whether I mind. And I decided that before I knew whether I minded, you should know I was not what you thought I was. I know what you are. You know what I said at a lectern in Chalford Parva 3 years ago. I know what you said, and I have watched you for a week, and I know what you are. I have spent 3 years afraid I was a fool about it. I am a fool about many things. I am not a fool about you. I know what you are. He did not touch the drawings. He looked at her. He said, very simply, May I look? Yes. He went to the pier table. He spread them out. He did not exclaim. He did not praise. He stood before each one and looked at it, and at the next, and at the next. And then he came back to the third one, the rebuilt rectory, and put one finger, without touching the paper, above the line where she had drawn the kitchen chimney. Here. Yes. This is the reason the draftsman at Clement's Partridge has never made a kitchen that worked. He does not understand that the flue has to turn at the height of the first floor, or the fire will not draw in a southwest wind. Now, who taught you this? I taught myself. My father had books. He had been, before he was a rector, apprenticed to a clerk of works at the cathedral at Winchester. He never built. He read. He taught me to read. Do not say it. Why not? Because you will mean it, and then I will not know what to do with it. He looked at her across the pier table. His hands were behind his back. His face was... It was the face of a man who was not hiding. It had taken him a week to stop hiding, and now he was not, and she did not know what to do with it either. I withdraw the contract, he said. Marcus, I withdraw the contract. I release you. I will make the settlement on your mother as promised. I will do it tonight. Mr. Harlow will bring the papers to your house in the morning. You owe me nothing. You owe my grandmother nothing. You will be free of this in a day, Miss Ashcombe. Stop. Evelyn, stop. I said stop. He stopped. I did not come here, she said, to be released. I came here to show you the drawings. I came here to say I am not what you thought. I did not say I do not want to be here. The silence was very long. Evelyn, he said, you will not call me Evelyn yet. You will finish what you were going to say. What I was going to say? The thing you were about to say, before I told you not to. I was about to say that I love you, that I have loved you for 3 years, that I am a coward and an arranger and I went about it badly, that I would be grateful if you would consider, at some point in the next 3 months, whether any of that, whether any version of me, is one you could consent to. Not as the contract, as yourself. That is what I was about to say. Yes, she said. I thought so. Evelyn. Not tonight. I am not answering tonight. You do not get to say it and have it answered in the same evening. I am not a fool either. I am going home. I will come to tea on Thursday as your grandmother has invited me. I will not tell her what you have said. I will think, and you will not ask me to think more quickly than I can, and when I have thought, I will tell you what I think. Is that clear? Yes. Collect the drawings. Give them back to me. He collected them. He handed them to her. His hand shook once, very slightly, as he did so. She saw it. She did not mention it. She put the drawings back into the reticule and tied the string and walked out of Ravenhill House and hailed a hackney and went home. She did not sleep again. But this time she lay in the dark and did not compose buildings. She composed, instead, one single sentence. She composed it in her head and unmade it and remade it and unmade it again. And at 5 in the morning, when the light began to come, she said it once, aloud, to the ceiling. I think I already love him too. And then she said it again, to be sure. And then she got up. Thursday tea was 51 hours away. She intended to use every minute of them. She did not expect her cousin Victor to find her first. He came on Wednesday morning, without warning, at 10:20. He did not send up a card. He knocked at the back door of the house in Chalford Street, as though he were a tradesman, and her mother's one girl, a plain, stout widow named Nora, who had been with them 11 years, opened the door and then stepped back without a word and stood in the corner of the kitchen, because she had known Victor since he was a boy of 16, and she had never trusted him. Evelyn was on the second-floor landing with a mending basket in one hand and her mother's shawl in the other when the knock came. She heard the murmur at the kitchen door. She heard Nora's voice, and then Nora's silence. Silence, in Nora, was a shout. It was the particular weighted silence of a woman who had known a boy since he was 16, and who had, at 20 and at 25 and at 30, found him still doing the same things, and still lying about them. Evelyn set the basket on the landing chair and went down the back stairs. The back stairs were narrow and uncarpeted, and smelled, as they always had, of the slightly overcooked tea her mother preferred, and the lavender water Nora used on the linen. The house was not large. It was not even comfortable. It was, however, theirs. That was why Evelyn had not yet allowed Marcus to install a fender in the kitchen, or a rug on the landing, even though a fender and a rug would have made her mother's life perceptibly better. Her mother had said, last week, with the careful dignity of a woman who had once been the wife of a rector, and was now beholden to a future son-in-law she had not yet met, "Darling, let the poor man. He wants to. Let him." Evelyn had not yet let him. She was working, still, on the particular psychology involved in accepting help without ceasing to be the person she had been before it arrived. The kitchen in the little Chalford Street house was a long, narrow room, with one window that gave onto a brick courtyard and a pump and the back of a stable. The range was banked low. A copper kettle sat on the hob with the lid just ajar. Onions hung in a string beside the pantry door. A cat that had chosen the house some years earlier, a tabby, one-eyed, clever, was sitting on the dresser and watching Victor the way cats watch a stranger who has not asked leave to sit. Nora had not moved from her corner. Nora's hands were folded across her apron, and her face was the face she wore when a man from the excise came to the door. Polite, absent, and very attentive. Victor was in the kitchen. He had taken off his hat, but not his coat. He was 33, her father's brother's son, fair-haired, handsome in the way that grew less handsome with each year, and his hands and his eyes were both too restless. "Cousin," he said, "a word." "In the parlor." "In the kitchen will do." "In the parlor," she said, "Victor." "Nora, the fire in the parlor, please." They sat in the parlor. She did not offer tea. "I hear," he said, "you have made a very great match." "I do not know what you have heard." "I have heard from 6 separate sources that the Duke of Ravenhill has been driving you in the park, and that his grandmother has received you. I have heard that there is an engagement. I have heard that there is a settlement being drawn up in the city." "Who has told you about a settlement?" "I have my sources, cousin. A man who stands to inherit as I do from your mother's estate does not allow matters of this scale to pass without interest. You do not stand to inherit anything. My mother has no estate. My father's living reverted to the parish. There is nothing to inherit. I have certain... He let the sentence go. He smiled. It was an insupportable smile. I have certain debts, cousin, of my own. I had hoped, when you married, that your husband might be reasonable about them. A small courtesy, from one cousin to another. Small to a duke, large to me. £600, give or take. Get out of this house. I will, when we have agreed. We will not agree. Get out! He leaned back in the chair and looked at her as though he was seeing her for the first time. The restlessness in his eyes had gone flat. The flatness was worse. I should not, he said, like to write a letter to your duke. About what? About the summer you were 19, cousin. About an assembly room at Churtwell. About a certain young man named Anthony, who was a friend of mine, and whom you compromised. I did not compromise Anthony. He says otherwise. He will say otherwise if I ask him. He is in Gloucestershire. He needs money. I can arrange it that he will say it very publicly. She did not move. She looked at him. Anthony Verrant, she said, attempted, at 19, to press me against a wall at a country dance. I put my elbow into his throat. He could not sing in the choir at Christmas because he could not breathe easily for 3 weeks. I did not compromise him. I very nearly killed him. I sometimes wish I had. That is one version of the story. That is the true version. Nobody cares which is true, cousin. They only care which is told, and how often, and by whom. Your duke will not want a bride with a story. I do not care whether it is true. I care that it exists. £600, in gold, by Saturday. Or a letter goes to 4 papers and 6 of his oldest relations, and you will be turned out of that drawing room with a speed you will not believe possible. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she stood up. Nora, she called. Her voice was very calm. Show Mr. Ashcombe out. He is leaving by the back door. Cousin, you will have your answer by Friday. You will have it, Victor, in a form you do not expect. Get out of my mother's house. She did not cry when he was gone. She stood at the window of the parlour with her hands folded and watched the light shift across the chimneys of the houses opposite. And she thought about Marcus and the wire across the door stillness of the way he stood, and about his grandmother's hand on hers, and about the drawings, and about the things she had said to the ceiling at 5 that morning. And she thought, I will not pay Victor. I will not let Marcus pay Victor. I will not let this be the thing that ends us. She sat down at her father's old writing desk, sharpened a pen, and began a letter. It took her 4 hours and 7 drafts, and when she had finished it, she put on her bonnet, and she walked to the offices of Mr. Harlow in Lincoln's Inn, and she said to the clerk at the front, I should like to see Mr. Harlow. I Miss Evelyn Ashcombe. My cousin, Mr. Victor Ashcombe, is attempting to extort £600 from me. I should like Mr. Harlow to hear about it from me before he hears about it from anyone else, including, if it can be managed, the Duke of Ravenhill. The clerk stood up very fast. Miss Ashcombe, he said, please, this way. Mr. Harlow's chambers were 3 narrow rooms on a first floor in Lincoln's Inn, reached by a staircase that had not been swept since Christmas, and a landing where a tabby cat slept on a pile of old deeds. The inner office was warmer and cleaner than the approach had suggested. A coal fire burned steadily in a small hearth. A tall window looked out onto a brick wall and a patch of pale sky. The walls were lined in oak presses with brass pulls. Above the mantel hung a framed engraving of an Oxford college. Below it, propped against the brass fender, sat a very old black umbrella that had clearly served Mr. Harlow since the reign of George III. A small brass plate on the inner door announced in engraved script, Harlow and Harlow, solicitors in Chancery. One of the Harlows had been dead for 20 years. The plate stayed. Mr. Harlow was a small, elderly, bald man who looked, Evelyn thought, like a kind sheep. He sat behind a desk that was too big for him, in a chair that had been built for someone heavier. He had taken off his spectacles to listen. He put them on again to write. He listened to her for 40 minutes. He made notes on a pad in a small, perfect copperplate hand. He asked 3 very precise questions, all of them about dates. He did not interrupt. He did not wince when she named the assembly room at Chertwell. He did not express opinion. At one point, when she was recounting Victor's exact phrasing about Anthony Verrant, he did something with his mouth that was not quite a smile and not quite a grimace, and that Evelyn would later, in retrospect, identify as the face of a man beginning to anticipate the ruin of another man with pleasure. When she had finished, he set down the pen, folded his hands on the blotter, and said, "I shall speak to the Duke tonight. I shall speak to your cousin Mr. Ashcombe tomorrow morning. I shall speak to Anthony Verrant's uncle, who is the rector of his parish, by Friday. I believe, Miss Ashcombe, that Mr. Victor Ashcombe will be leaving London for his country seat on Saturday. I believe he will not return this season." "You can do that." "I can, Miss Ashcombe. Forgive me. I have been, in my time, a thorough man." She smiled. It was the first real smile in 2 days. "Mr. Harlow." "Miss?" "Thank you for writing to my mother." He looked up. A flicker crossed his face. Not quite embarrassment. A kind of rueful, private pleasure. "His Grace," he said, "is a patient man. Not an easy man. A patient one. I was glad to write the letter, miss. I should have liked, for some time now, to see him less patient about 1 or 2 things in his life. I thought perhaps you might be a person who could assist with that." "Mr. Harlow." "Miss." "Has he been very lonely?" Mr. Harlow considered the question. "Yes, miss," he said at last. "Very lonely. He is not aware of it. He would not describe it that way. He does not, in my observation, have an adequate vocabulary for it. But yes." She came out of Mr. Harlow's chambers at 4:15, into the specific late afternoon light of Lincoln's Inn. The dust of a long, dry day rising off the gravel. The plane trees casting their first real shade of the year across the low stone wall. A clerk from another office hurrying across the court with a leather case clutched to his chest. The porter at the gate touched his hat to her, with the faint, involuntary respect porters gave to women who had clearly just been about serious business. She walked back to Chalford Street at her own pace. She was not in any hurry now. She was not, she found, in any particular kind of weather at all. She went home. She wrote a short note to Marcus. She wrote, "I will see you at your grandmother's on Thursday, as planned. Something has occurred. Mr. Harlow has it in hand. You need not come before then. I should like the time to think. E." She sent it by messenger. She did not hear back. She thought, for the first half of Wednesday night, that perhaps she had been too brusque. Then, at 10 in the evening, a note came back in his hand. It said, "I shall not come. I shall wait. I shall not write again until tomorrow evening. I shall not ask for anything you have not offered. N." She read it 3 times. She put it in the tin box with the drawings. She slept. Thursday was the first day of spring that felt like spring. The air in the London streets had turned, suddenly, from thin cold to something softer. The plane trees in the squares had unclenched their fists. A fruit seller outside the door had violets on her tray. Evelyn walked through the morning as though the morning were going to carry her if she did not walk too hastily. She did not pay particular attention to what she wore at breakfast, what she ate at breakfast, or what she said to her mother at breakfast. And her mother, wise enough after 62 years to recognize the unusual weather of a daughter on a particular day, did not press her. At 12, she went up and changed. Madame Claudel had delivered, the week before, a dove-grey walking dress which suited her, Madame Claudel had said, because it did not compete with her eyes. Evelyn had not known until that moment that she had eyes which required not to be competed with. She put on the dress. She put on, for the first time in London, the pearl earrings that had been her mother's mother's. Pearls of a very modest size, but very good water, which her grandmother had worn at her own wedding in 1758, and which Evelyn's mother had kept, through the lean years, wrapped in a scrap of rose velvet in a box at the bottom of her drawer. Her mother, seeing them, had touched Evelyn's ear once, softly, and said nothing. Evelyn had not needed her to. She took a hackney at 2. She could have walked. She chose not to. She arrived at Grosvenor Square at 3. The dowager was alone in the yellow drawing-room. The spaniel was asleep on her feet, as before. The Duchess looked up, and her pale eyes, which were, Evelyn realized for the first time, very like her grandson's, went from Evelyn's face to her hands and back. "Sit down, my dear," said the dowager. "Have you decided?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Tell me." "I came here to say that if your grandson will have me after what he has heard from Mr. Harlow about my cousin, then yes." The dowager smiled. It was the first smile Evelyn had seen on that face. It was a good smile. It was the face of a young woman still, somewhere inside the old one. "And has he heard?" "Mr. Harlow would have spoken to him yesterday evening." "Then I believe, my dear, he is waiting in the Chinese morning room at this very moment. I asked Henderson to put him there half an hour ago. Go and tell him. Leave the old woman. I shall drink the Madeira alone, and I shall not be offended." Evelyn rose. "One thing, Your Grace." "You are not dying." "Not today, child. Not today. Perhaps I shall live to see a godchild. I should very much like to. Now go. You have made him wait 3 years. Another 7 minutes will be intolerable." The Chinese morning room was small and hung with blue silk patterned in pale silver dragons that chased each other up toward the cornice. The floor was polished so thoroughly it held the sky in it. There were 3 low chairs in black lacquer, a rosewood cabinet, a pair of Chinese vases in the greens of moss and pond water. One of the vases held a single branch of apple blossom that someone, she suspected Henderson, had cut from the small orchard behind the stables at dawn. The blossom was beginning to tire in the vase. A few petals had dropped onto the cabinet top. The window was open a hand's breadth, and the spring smelled of Grosvenor Square's particular mix of warmed stone, carriage-hire leather, and the thin green note of new grass from the garden below. He was standing at the window with his back to the door. He heard her come in, and he did not turn. "Evelyn." "Marcus?" "Harlow has told me everything." "I supposed." "Your cousin." "Harlow says he is leaving London on Saturday." "Harlow says so. I have spoken to my solicitor. I have spoken, separately, to a magistrate whom I knew as a boy. If your cousin ever comes within 2 streets of you or your mother again, he will be detained. I have told Harlow to instruct him in these terms." "Thank you." He turned then. His face. She had thought at the British Museum that she had seen his face. She had thought in the drawing room on Tuesday that she had seen it. She had been wrong both times. This was his face. He was, for the first time since she had met him, visibly afraid. "I have not slept," he said. "I have. Harlow spent a long time telling me how I should manage this conversation. I do not remember any of what he said." "Then do not manage it." "I do not know how to ask you without managing it." "Ask me as though I were a farmer at a parish lectern 3 years ago, and you, a stranger at the back of the room who had not known he was coming to that meeting." He looked at her. "Miss Ashcombe," he said.
"Yes."
"Will you marry me?"
"Yes."
"You have—"
I said yes, Marcus.
I did not finish.
You did not need to. Yes. On my conditions.
Name them.
1. I will not be managed, Not by you, not by your grandmother, not by Mr. Harlow, however good his intentions. I am 26. I have run my mother's house since I was 19. I will run yours with you, not under you. Yes. 2. The drawings. Those and the others I will make. They are mine. I will study. I will correspond, if I can, with the builders at Clements Partridge. I will not do it in secret. I will do it with your name and mine on the correspondence. You may think whatever you please about a wife who signs her letters to a builder. Yes. 3. My mother comes to us, if she wishes. She may also stay at Chalford Street if she prefers, but she is provided for, not with a settlement that lapses,
but with a provision that is mine and hers for her lifetime. Not yours. Mine. Yes, except that it will be ours. You will find I do not distinguish the pronoun. 4. You will not lie to me again, about anything, ever. Not to be kind, not to spare me. If you find yourself about to lie to me, you will say instead, I cannot tell you yet, and I will wait. I can wait. I am not, as it happens, a woman who panics. But I will not be lied to. I've been lied to enough in my life by men who meant well. Yes, I will not lie to you again. 5. If I say no to something, I mean no. You will not arrange around me. You will not engineer. You will ask again if you wish, a week later, a year later. But you will not, Evelyn, arrange. Yes? Yes, I swear it. I will not arrange. Good. That is all, I think, for tonight. Did you wish to... He was across the room. She had not seen him move. He did not kiss her. He took her hands. He held her hands. He put his forehead against her forehead and stood breathing for a long time. Thank you, he said, to her hair, to her temple, to no one in particular. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She let him. After a minute she lifted her face, and he kissed her then, properly, once, carefully. The kind of kiss a man gives when he has been dreaming of it for 3 years, and is afraid it will break under the weight of the wanting. It did not break. She kissed him back. She was not, as she had told him, a woman who panicked. She was also not, as it turned out, a woman who could go slowly. When they came out into the corridor 12 minutes later, Henderson was passing with a tray. Henderson, who was 61, who had seen everything, who had, in his time, seen the old Duke in a worse state than this, did not move a muscle. Her Grace, your grandmother, said Henderson to the Duke, is asking whether you and Miss Ashcombe will take supper with her. She has instructed the cook to prepare a roast fowl. She says to inform you that she has been instructing the cook to prepare a roast fowl every Thursday for 3 years, and it is the first Thursday in which there is a reason. Tell my grandmother, said Marcus, that we should be very glad to. Tell my grandmother, Henderson, that I am... He stopped. That you are? Prompted Henderson gently. That I am grateful to her. Yes, Your Grace. I shall tell her you are grateful. Tell her I know what she has done. Yes, Your Grace. Tell her I shall. Tell her I shall be less of a fool hereafter. I shall tell her, Your Grace, that you are endeavoring not to be a fool in the future. She will be delighted, Your Grace. It has been a common prayer of hers. Henderson bowed and moved off down the corridor, and Evelyn, beside Marcus in the blue-papered hall, with her hand in his, began to laugh. It was a laugh she had not had in her body in years. It was her father's laugh, actually, the one he had used when the deacon's wife had said something accidentally outrageous at the vestry meeting. She laughed until she had to lean against the wall. He did not laugh. He watched her, and his eyes were wet, and the look on his face was the look of a man who had been thirsty for a very long time, and was drinking. The engagement was announced properly on the following Monday. The paragraph that carried it in the Morning Post was the standard 3 lines, set in the standard narrow column between the announcement of a christening at Henley and a brief paragraph on the removal of a minor Portuguese dignitary to Bath. The name of Miss Evelyn Ashcombe, daughter of the late Reverend Dr. Thomas Ashcombe, late of Chalford Parva in the county of Herts, took her place between these things, as though she had been set there by the compositor himself. The wedding was fixed for the 2nd week of July, at the end of the season, at the Duchess's own parish church in Mayfair. The papers carried it for 3 days running. Evelyn's old cousin Victor was not mentioned in any of them. He had left London for Yorkshire on Saturday morning, as Mr. Harlow had predicted. A letter from Mr. Harlow's office to a legal correspondent in York, in terms Mr. Harlow would not describe to Evelyn, but which he implied had been written with an amount of care he had not expended in 30 years, had preceded Victor's arrival by 2 days. Victor, on stepping off the coach at the King's Head in York, had been handed a sealed envelope by an elderly attorney he did not know. He had read the contents. He had not, from that afternoon to the end of the season, been heard from in London again. Anthony Verrant received a letter from his rector uncle, delivered in person by the rector himself, who had ridden 12 miles on a cold afternoon to put the letter into the young man's hand. He read it. He sat a long time in his lodgings afterwards. He did not speak on the subject of Evelyn Ashcombe to anyone, ever again. The season went on. There were teas and rides and 2 balls and the opera. Evelyn wore the pink silk, the white silk, the blue silk, the dove grey and, to Madame Claudel's great satisfaction, a gold-figured gown of the Duchess's own commission that had been made in 9 days for the St. John's ball. She waltzed badly at first, and well by the end. She met the Foreign Secretary. She held her own in a conversation, at a dinner of 14, about the proper proportion of a Palladian window, against a man who had built 3 houses in Piccadilly, and who afterwards sent her a copy of Vitruvius with a note. Some of the season became, in retrospect, a blur of particular small pleasures. There was the first time she was announced, at a ball given by a woman she had never met, as Miss Ashcombe, fiancée to the Duke of Ravenhill, and saw her own name become an object in the world, a tile on a board, a thing that could be moved. There was the evening at the opera, at which she forgot, for 5 minutes, that she was pretending, and watched Marcus in the box across the aisle, watching her. There was the morning she walked out alone to purchase paper at a stationer's near the museum, and was treated, for the first time in her adult life, by the kind of clerk who, having recognized her name, selected, without asking, the best paper in the shop. There was the afternoon she stood at her window at Ravenhill House, and watched a spring rain come across Grosvenor Square, and thought, if none of the rest of this is real, the rain is. There was the Tuesday she called on the Dowager alone, as she did every Tuesday thereafter, and read aloud to her from the Annual Register of 1789, which the Dowager wished to hear, because she said it contained the year she had married the Duke's grandfather, and she wished to be reminded how little anyone had foreseen. There was the Thursday the Dowager gave her, without ceremony, a small gold locket on a black velvet ribbon, with a lock of the Duke's infant hair inside it, and had said, I have had this 40 years. I should like it to belong to a person who will not lose it. You will not. Take it. There was the afternoon the Dowager fell asleep during the reading, and Evelyn sat beside the chair in the yellow drawing-room for 35 minutes in silence, holding her place in the book, watching the spaniel's paws twitch in his own dreaming, and feeling a kind of large, gentle tenderness settle in her that she had not known was waiting. She sent the first of her drawings, on the Duke's notepaper and in her own hand, to the senior partner at Clements Partridge. The partner called in person the following week. He was a spare, surprised man in his late 50s, who had read her letter 4 times, and who, after a cup of coffee in Ravenhill House, asked whether she would be willing to consult on a double almshouse at Hitchin. She said she would. He paid her the fee she asked, which was exactly what he would have paid a man, after Marcus had ascertained, privately, what that figure was, and communicated it to her. She laughed. She took the fee. She banked it at Coutts in her own name. The first almshouse was finished 18 months later. The second almshouse, which was her own commission, she designed alone. She drew the third while she was expecting their daughter. That, however, is later. The first morning of July came in warm and still. London had not yet begun to move. A few pigeons turned on the ridgepole of the house across the square, and a single milk cart rattled up Mount Street, and a cat, not their cat, some other cat, some roving grey tomcat with a torn ear and a private kingdom, crossed the pale paving slabs below, in the particular proprietary manner of cats who had been crossing those paving slabs for years. 6 weeks after Thursday in the Chinese morning room, Evelyn Ashcombe, who was, for 2 weeks more, still Evelyn Ashcombe, stood at the west window of Ravenhill House in a dressing gown and watched the light come up across the square, and found that her hands were full of warm coffee and her head was very quiet. She had not expected the quiet. She had expected, at this juncture, a particular kind of triumph, a particular kind of vindication. What she had instead was quiet, and the morning, and the sound of her mother coughing 2 stories up. Her mother, who had moved into the East Wing 10 days ago, and who was now saying it was the best room she had ever occupied. It was. Marcus came in behind her, in his shirt sleeves, carrying another cup of coffee. He set it on the sill. "What are you thinking?" he said. "I was thinking," she said, "that I did not read the last paragraph of the contract." He paused. "Ah, I have just read it." "Have you? Where did you find it?" "Your tin box, on the shelf in the library. I did not open it. I put the new draft inside. I thought you would find it eventually." "Marcus." "Yes?" "The last paragraph says the contract may be terminated by either party only upon the written request of the other, and that no request has been made, nor shall ever be made, by the party of the first part." "Yes." "You never set an end date." "I never could." She looked at him. "You are," she said, "without exception, the most arrogant man I have ever met." "Yes." "You are also—" "Yes." "You will let me finish the sentence, Marcus." "Yes." She set the coffee down. She put her arms around his shoulders. She put her forehead against his collarbone, where the shirt lay open, and breathed him in. The particular scent of him, clean linen and, faintly, the cedar of the shelves in the library where he wrote his letters. "You are also the man I intend to have for the rest of my life," she said. "And I should be grateful, therefore, if you would stop arranging me and start asking me instead. Beginning with what I should like for breakfast, which is toast." "Toast," he said. "With butter." "With butter. Not jam. Do not arrange jam." "I shall not arrange jam." She looked up at him. "Good," she said. And they went down to breakfast. 6 months later, on the first frost of November, the village of Chalford Parva was in the particular autumnal mood of a place that has been the same village for 400 years, and intends to be the same village for 400 more. The elms along the lane had shed in 3 great waves, and the gold lay on the grass and the stones in drifts a foot deep, and the starlings were gathering for their evening turn over the church tower. The river, a quarter of a mile off through the trees, ran dark and cold, and carried the first of the season's alders in flower along its margins. The smell of the place was wood smoke and apples, and, from the long garden behind the rectory, the particular honey-sweet smell of burnt leaves. Evelyn Ashcombe, now the Duchess of Ravenhill, and quite used to being so, stood in the doorway of a small stone cottage in the village which she had just finished restoring as a wedding gift to Nora, her mother's widowed housemaid, who had married, at 52, to the astonishment of all, the blacksmith of the village. The cottage had 3 chimneys and a long, slow roof and south-facing windows. It had been designed and built and paid for by the Duchess herself. Marcus had stood at her shoulder through every argument with the builder. He had not arranged. She stood now in the doorway in a grey traveling cloak with her hand tucked into the crook of her husband's arm, watching Nora and the blacksmith come up the path.
Above the kitchen chimney, a small weather vane turned slowly against a cold, clear sky. The weather vane was in the shape of a dove. The dove had been, once, a thing Evelyn had carved at 8 years old with her father's whittling knife.
She had found it again, the month before the wedding, in the bottom of her mother's sewing box. She had meant to throw it away. Marcus had taken it from her hand without a word, turned it over in his own, and said, "I know a man in Southwark who can copy it in brass." He had not arranged. He had asked. She had said yes. Beyond the cottage garden, the village lane ran down past the last of the chestnut trees to the bridge over the stream, and beyond that, the rising shoulder of the hill that carried the lane up to the ridge. A plough team had finished in the high field and was coming home, the horses slow and steady in the cold, fading light. A robin sat on the wall of the cottage and looked at the three of them, Evelyn, Marcus, and the brass dove, with the affronted attention robins reserved for occasions of ceremony they had not been consulted on. Evelyn had not been back to Chelford Parva in 4 years until this morning. The lane had not changed. The stones in the wall opposite had been in the same order, she was fairly certain, in the reign of King Charles I. The rectory at the end of the lane had a new thatched roof and the same green shutters. The parish hall, which she had seen from a distance as the carriage came down the hill, still had the wrong roof pitch. She had, in her new reticule, drawings for a corrected pitch. She would offer them to the vestry at the next meeting. She would not, this time, pay for the repair herself. The parish would pay. The parish, in its 400 years, had not yet ruined itself, and she did not intend to let her own wealth be the thing that stole from it the dignity of putting its own roof right. The dove turned east now, in the first evening wind. Nora reached the door. The blacksmith took off his cap. "Mistress," said Nora. "Welcome home, Nora," said Evelyn, and above them, slow and sure as a held note, the small brass dove turned with the wind and caught the last light of the day and held it. If you have stayed with this story to the end, thank you. If you have ever signed your name to something without reading it and found that the thing you had signed was, against every expectation, the life you had been waiting for, tell me in the comments. If you would like more stories of unexpected arrangements becoming unexpected loves, there is a subscribe button below. I shall see you by the fire again soon.